Alright, hello everyone. In this video, I'm just going to show you how I use AI as a tool to help me create a sort of storyboard to organize and brainstorm my writing. So, yes, there is a lot of controversy around AI, and some artists and creators are very repulsed by it. However, I personally find some features useful for me. I am not a fancy YouTuber promoting anything. I am just sharing ideas with others in case they want to use some of my techniques too. Or perhaps they can even suggest a better way of doing things. One of the ways I use AI is to build my character boards. I use Canva whiteboards, like what you see on the screen here, to create a family tree. When I am writing about dynasties, I find this kind of brainstorming, mapping, and infographic style organization very useful because most of the really important characters are going to be connected somehow. For example, my current novel is about the chief consort of Selim I, who was the mother of Suleiman the Magnificent. So, Selim, as an Ottoman sultan, had several consorts. So, as you can see here, this line right down here, those are all his consorts. And only one was his wife, the other are concubines. So, it becomes difficult to keep track of every consort and their children just on a piece of paper. But that is always where I first begin. I start by writing down names, birth dates, death dates, marriages, or the date they became a favorite concubine, and the birth and deaths of the children. And however, I'm a very visual person, I need more than that. So after I get all the information down on paper, I start to build a family tree complete with portraits. This helps me visualize the characters better. So, like, zoom in here, and I will start up here. Let's see if I could zoom in. How far can I zoom in? Oh, that's good. I can see everything better this way. So here I can see who died as a child, who outlives who, and I even annotate the ethnic backgrounds of the characters, which help me form their backstories. And this is especially relevant to my novels I'm writing now because Ottoman concubines came from very diverse backgrounds and regions. So honestly, the portraits are one of the things I need most from AI. Sometimes I also ask general questions about dates, marriages, battles, movements between provinces, but my advice would be to definitely be careful and always fact check what AI tells you because it does make mistakes, especially with historical details. Um, Once I get this family tree organized visually, I can start seeing possible stories emerge naturally. For example, Salim's first sons pass away quite young. Three sons also disappear from the historical record around the same time. A lot of writers have chosen to suggest that Salim killed his own sons. But, hold on, excuse me. This isn't going to be edited, by the way, so you're going to hear all my little coughs and, like, I don't know if I start sneezing or something, whatever. But I don't have time to edit this one, so. Um, yeah, so a lot of writers try to say that he killed his own sons, but honestly, I find that extremely unlikely. I think this is just to make him appear more gruesome than he actually was. Because Salim was just because he was a formidable ruler does not automatically mean he would murder his own children, especially because this supposedly happens before he even becomes sultan. So that narrative never really made sense to me. What that means is his sons were never a threat to him when they passed away. So, I mean, if he was already sultan and his sons were like very powerful, like he became with his own father, I can see how he would see his sons as threats and possibly might take them out, like if he thought they were rebelling or something. But this is definitely not the case because when his sons passed away, he was not sultan. So, what seems more plausible to me, and I'll show you here. So, this son, he died at 12. And um, these sons here just disappear from the record around the same time, these three sons. So, what seems more plausible is to me is plague, because the plague was very rampant during this period, and the plague would oftentimes wipe out like huge chunks of the harem, like from other sultans too, not just Bayezid or Salim, or like this happened a few times in Ottoman history. I mean, a few times in a way that was quite serious. Like, it actually took a lot of the imperial children. So, we have his eldest son right here, Shahzada Saleh. He he dies separately around age 12, which could have easily been illness or even an accident, maybe something like a riding accident. I mean, that's pretty believable. Then we have three more sons disappearing around the same time. Salim's mother also dies from an illness because the exact date of her death is actually recorded, and it is considered an illness that she died of, and she wasn't that old when she died. So to me, a plague outbreak affecting the harem actually makes more sense than Salim murdering his sons. You know what I mean? Occam's razor type of girl here. And this is one of the things I like about building timelines visually. Patterns become easier to notice that way. So, looking further down the tree, I notice another historical discrepancy over here. Let's see here. So, right in here. So, Salim's daughter Fatma is often attributed to being Hafsa's daughter. They try to attribute almost all of Salim's children to Hafsa, and this just doesn't make sense at all. I think it's just because they want to appeal. They want to, I guess, whitewash the whole concubinage thing. So they try to make it seem like Salim had two wives a lot of times when that's just definitely not the case. And I'll explain more as we go on. But um so she's the main character of my story, Hafsa, and it doesn't make sense when I looked at the timeline that Fatima was plausibly her daughter. Hafsa would have likely been too young to be a favored consort. People sometimes forget that the girls in the harem were educated and trained before being introduced to a sultan or prince. So they learned etiquette, language, religion, music, refinement, and palace customs. The Valida Sultan was only going to introduce women who were educated, presentable, and prepared for court life because these women were possibly future mothers of the princes of the empire. So that process took time. She didn't just like get into the harem and then like right away became the consort of Salim. Now, there are a few exceptions to the rule. Sometimes that did happen, but it did not happen with her. Fatima was probably the daughter of another concubine, so I created her a mother. Um, a lot of these consorts, I gave them names. Like, we know they exist, but they don't, their names weren't recorded. So they have this name called, like, that means like a chain doe. And so I gave them actual names in my story, of course. I'm not going to call them all that, like, a placeholder name, right? So, um, what becomes interesting though is, or what is interesting though, is that Fatima and Hafsa had a very close kind of mother daughter relationship. So, this is probably why many people assumed Hafsa was her mother. So, instead, especially people who don't understand Islamic culture and stuff like that, about fostering and things like that. So, or at least the way we see fostering or practice it, especially in antiquity. So, instead, I explained that closeness through the fostering. So, if Fatma's mother died in childbirth, which was extremely common historically, Hafsa could have easily stepped in as a mother figure for Fatma. And honestly, this kind of fostering happened constantly in the Ottoman harem. There are many examples of concubines helping raise children that were not biologically their own. Even Mehmet the Conqueror was raised largely by Mara Brankovic after the death of his mother. She never had children of her own, but Mehmet viewed her as a mother figure, and later she even governed his harem as his Valida Sultan, the queen mother. The Ottoman harem was not the Orientalist trope modern television portrays it as. It was almost like a miniature government and household system with the Valida Sultan at the top. Another thing the timeline helped explain was Hafsa's relationship with Salim himself. So let's go down to Hafsa over here. Ah, oh my gosh. What happened? Okay. Um, okay. Okay, I lost my place in my notes. Hold on. I'm looking. That's what happens when I get distracted. I have ADHD, so I get distracted quite easily. Oh my gosh, where's my spot? Okay. Found it. Another thing the timeline helped explain was Hafsa's relationship with Salim himself. According to the Ottoman custom of this period, once a concubine gives birth to a son, the sultan or prince stops being intimate with her. Her role then shifts towards raising her son and eventually following him to his province when he comes of age. She can't have more than one son because she can't be in two places at once. So, this is why they had that custom. So, Hafsa has several daughters, as you can see here, before she has Suleiman. So, this actually explains why Salim and Hafsa likely spent much more time together and developed a strong bond and affection for each other because she didn't get pregnant with her son right away. So she was still um, quite intimate with Salim. All right, so now this is where the cool magic happens, and you start to see like really good story situations arise up. So, another interesting story opportunity appears when Salim fathers a child with Hafsa, which is Suleiman right here, and another concubine in the same year, which is this daughter here. Historical accounts suggest these two siblings were close because she wrote lots of letters to Suleiman, actually, like nice letters. And so they had a close bond. Suleiman and his half sister, the one born with in the same year as him. So historical accounts suggest the siblings were close. Perhaps they even shared a milk mother because they were born the same year. They might have had the same milk mother, which would have bonded them even more closely. Milk mothers or milk siblings are considered full siblings. So they're half siblings, but if they share a milk mother, then their bond is more like full siblings, regardless, because of the milk mother bond. This concubine, she also dies during the plague, 1505, right? So that left this daughter motherless, and it also we also have an opportunity for Hafsa to also foster this girl, which seems likely because she also had a nice bond with Suleiman's mother. you start to see this pattern emerge that Hafsa was very maternal, that she would take care of the imperial children who lost their mothers. And for moving further down, we see a sad story here where this daughter, she dies around 7 years old as a child, probably of an illness. And her mother follows her about a year later. You can work with that in the story. Perhaps she dies of grief, of losing her child, you know, and then we don't really know. But, you know, these gaps in history create opportunities for storytelling. That's why having this kind of storyboard is pretty, and it's very useful. So then we have Shahzada Sultan. So her story is also pretty interesting, right? She was married to a statesman and died young herself. You can see she was like 16 years old when she died. So this tells me that it's possible, very possible, that she died in childbirth or maybe an illness, but childbirth seems likely because 16 years old was a common age to get married in the medieval times. So it might have been childbirth. Childbirth was the number one killer of women until about 100 years ago with like modern medicine and all that. So a lot of women died in childbirth. I think in my father's family tree, like there was so many women who died in childbirth on his family tree. I was actually surprised by that when we built a family tree for my father's side of the family. But yeah, and yeah, so like even 100 years ago, women were dying a lot from childbirth complications. So that is a very strong plausibility. The same statesman later, he marries Hatice here, Hafsa's first daughter. And this character is going to be interesting because what's interesting about him is he started out as a gate guard, like probably a Bastanju, you know? Like an imperial guard, the guy who holds the keys to the gates. Or maybe one of the the guys holding the halberds, you know, like the crescent shaped blade thing that like stands at the gate. Well, he's that's how he starts out, and then he becomes the vizier of Salim. And then he becomes a Bey, and he was present on many campaigns of Salim and his son Suleiman. He was even there at the sieges of Belgrade and Rhodes, and later during the siege of Vienna. But I I'm pretty sure he dies on or no, he I think he dies on his way to the siege of Vienna. So this is a warrior guy. This guy is like, he's interesting. Good to know. I'm gonna come up with some interesting stuff to write about him. So these are the kind of characters I really enjoy working with because they connect generations and political events together. But honestly, one of the wildest stories I discovered while organizing this family tree. Okay, let me go back to over here. Oh well, and here's a Shah Huban too. So Shah Huban, she is also left motherless It looks like her daughter, or her daughter. It looks like her mother dies in childbirth. She also had a close relationship with Hafsa. So Hafsa just takes all the little orphans without their mothers, you know. She becomes their mother. And this one, I'm going to skip this one because I don't want to spoil the surprise for people who are listening to the story. So I'm just going to skip those, pretend like you didn't see it. Um, so So, yes, this one right here. So, these two, okay, this story right here is kind of wild. So, I discovered while organizing this family tree that Uwe's mother left the harem and was married off to a statesman while unknowingly pregnant with Salim's child. And this must have been like a total scandal. I'm telling you. This probably was crazy for their time. Um, Normally, there was a waiting period and precautions to prevent exactly this kind of thing, but pregnancies are not always obvious immediately. Sometimes women do not show early. Sometimes symptoms are irregular. Sometimes they still have bleeding even though they're pregnant. So she can maybe think she's not pregnant because she's bleeding, right? You know? And sometimes pregnancies simply go unnoticed longer than expected. So eventually she gave birth after the marriage, like way too early and to a full term infant. And while everyone understood biologically that the child was Salim's son, legally the child belongs to her husband because he was born during their marriage. And also, he was born outside the imperial harem. So, because of that, Uves could never inherit the throne, and he was removed from the succession entirely. So, as the Ottoman heir's paternity had to be above reproach, hence one of the reasons why the imperial harem existed, he was pretty much like kicked off of the succession. But also this is a situation in which they became more strict about favored concubines having marriages arranged. They increased the waiting period, no doubt, before that kind of thing could take place. And still, Salim appears to have cared for Uves like a son. He just never openly claimed him as his son because he really couldn't. Like legally, he couldn't. And he even granted both him and his legal father positions and honors. So then we finally get to Aisha Hatun. So Aisha Hatun was Salim's only official wife. She had originally been the widow of Salim's brother, and while she never had children with either husband, the political alliance her marriage brought to Salim became extremely important during the Ottoman succession struggle. So, at the point at this point in the story, it becomes like really dramatic because Salim and his brother Ahmet are already fighting for the throne before their father Bayezid II has even died. Ahmet had a stronger bureaucratic support, while Salim was heavily favored by the military because he had built a reputation as a warrior like a Ghazi prince. When tensions escalated, Salim marched into Thrace, or Rumelia, And Ahmet tried consolidating power by taking Karaman, or Konya. It's also known as Konya nowadays. So Bayezid ordered both sons back to their provinces, but neither of them obeyed their father. Eventually, Selim marched directly against his father and was defeated at the Battle of Korlu, losing, the Battle of Chorlu, and he lost many janissaries. Like, it was a pretty bad defeat for Selim. So he fled across the Black Sea to Kefe, where Suleiman was governing, which is right next to the Crimea. I mean, well, it is in the Crimea essentially, but it's next to the Crimean kingdom or palace or whatever you want to call it, right? So once again, the family tree helps connect everything together because Kefe had previously been governed by Aisha Hatun's first husband, Selim's brother, before his death. Now, while in Crimea, Selim gained major military support from the Crimean Tatars by marrying Aisha too. He eventually returned, forced Bayezid to abdicate, and took the throne. Oh, my paper just blew away. I have my notes here. I have to have notes or I will like go off topic because, ADHD. Such a terrible thing. But anyways, so then came the brutal aftermath of this. Okay, Selim eliminated all the remaining rivals, which is what the Ottomans are kind of known for. He murdered, or I guess systematically executed, his brothers, his nephews, and his grandnephews in his male line. That way there was no claimants left to the throne except for Selim and, by this time, Suleiman, because Suleiman was his only surviving, I should say, legitimate son, because there was also Uves, but he couldn't inherit the throne, right? So, honestly, laying all this out visually with portraits, timelines, political alliances, like especially with the wife, births, deaths, it, and I also have historical events written down in my like journal too. So this all helps me understand the emotional and political connections so much better. And that is really why I use AI and visual boards. It can't replace creativity or research, especially regarding history, because you still need to actually know what you are writing. Like, you cannot put an AI and be like, write me this historical, I don't know, like romance novel or something, because the AI they're not going to get like all, I don't know. You have to have a plan. Like, you still have to map all this out. Now, I would say you can use AI as like a editor, I guess you could say. Like, to ask it to correct your grammar, or like, you know, make sure your like sometimes so I use a AI voice to read my story, because I plan on writing 8 novels and I want them all to have their own special voice. So you can use AI to organize your, I guess, your story so the AI reads it better, if that makes sense. Because if you just copy and paste your story into the text to speech, it doesn't really sound good. But if you copy and paste your story into AI and you tell it to organize it and fix the flow for the actual text to speech, um, it comes out a lot better. So I would recommend doing that too if you want to have an AI voice read your story. But anyways, um, the AI can help you organize massive amounts of historical information, but you have to feed it the information, because if you don't feed it the historical information, it I don't know, it's not very good at getting all the facts and all the actual events, you know? It makes a lot of mistakes. I've caught so many mistakes, like when I ask it like basic questions. So I wouldn't trust it to actually write a story for you. In fact, that's not really writing a story. That's more like asking AI to tell you a bedtime story or something, you know? One that might not be that good. But anyways, um so yeah, I would genuinely like love to hear how other people organize their writing. Whether you use AI, notebooks, sticky notes, whatever, spreadsheets. Let me know in the comments. All right. And thanks for listening.